here, making sure I share it to my audience as well. And that's awesome. So I think we're good. I think we need to fix now that I'm looking at it. Okay, I think we're good. So let's take a second to make sure and check and make sure we're live everywhere we said we wanted to be. Because sometimes LinkedIn is, does some little crazy stuff. So let me see if I can see you live on LinkedIn. But go ahead. Let's get busy.
Well, hey, it's a new day for us. We are bringing it's live, it's life live, and so let me just thank everybody for being here. If you haven't shown up yet, we're gonna wait. We're gonna be here every Wednesday at 7. So you're gonna know where we are. But it's just introduce ourselves. It's my name is Juan Lee. I'm the founder of Clear Journey, and I'm an author and I'm a speaker. And this is what we are expanding our normal podcast because we record our normal podcasts, and then we bring them and we release them on a every 2 weeks. But this is going to be our opportunity to speak in current events and actually apply some of the things that we talk about at Clear Journey. Clear Journey is it's a nonprofit organization that supports individuals and families that are struggling with this thing called life, and we give them education. And in addition to that, we give resources so that they can navigate life successfully. They can be their very best. So what we're going to do is in this place, we're going to see if we can put some practicality to it, and use those tools that we supply over there in our everyday life. So, Oliver, introduce yourself.
Hey, I'm Oliver Marcel. I'm an author, speaker, and coach in the relationship building and men's enrichment spaces. It is just my goal in life to provide someone with some level of clarity on the front end before they do something that may throw off the trajectory of their lives. And that's me, man. I love to see relationships thrive. I wrote a book for men entitled Overcoming the Man Laws. And so I am your guy when it comes to building your dream relationship, both personally and professionally. That's me.
And Oliver also is a part of Clear Journey. Also, let's be clear,
Indeed.
he's a strategic partner that we support. We support him as he supports us, and so we're going to have a great time and just encouraging our audience, those that are interested in wanting to grow and be more productive and being very productive in their lives and being able to live a more fulfilled life. That's what this thing is all about. That's where we named it. It's life, and now we're going to go with this life live, so we can be more uh, receptive and engaging with the audience.
I love it.
So, you
And
got
listen,
anything
if
you
you
want to?
hear, let me say this before we jump into it. If you are watching this live or if you're watching the replay, make sure that you share this. I'm looking around. You see me looking. I got a couple screens here because I'm trying to do what I'm asking you to do is to make sure that I'm sharing it with my audience as well. So make sure you share this so we can get more people engaged in the conversation.
Well, and that's great. That's hey, I'm excited. We're going to be doing, like I said, we're going to be doing this every Wednesday night at 7 o'clock, and we're just going to hopefully build a community that's about getting and being more productive in life. Today, we're just going to start off with just hey, understanding. We talked about this, and what it's basically going to be about is about having the winning attitude in life. It's how do we determine and find out the right attitude that we need to be able to navigate life successfully? And I mean, hey, the first thing I guess we want to know is that what is an attitude?
Mm.
We talk, attitude. What is it? Attitudes are they're many, they can be negative or they can be positive, but they basically what they do is that they allow us to position ourselves as it relates to how we see situations and circumstances in our lives. And with that, we can determine what our outcome can be if we have the proper attitude that we can position ourselves to be able to know where we are and where we're headed, how we're going to get there.
Mhm.
Um, what does a winning attitude look like? And this is something that I think is going to be pivotal in being able to get that winning attitude. And this is going to be something I know we're going to have to talk about, because here it is. A winning attitude allows everybody to win
Mhm.
what we all have in common. So it's a little bit more than, hey, how does everybody win? And everybody, because we have to have something in common. We run into situations typically where we have obstacles and things that oppose us, but we very rarely try to look at the object or the obstacle from another perspective, not only our own. And when we're able to do that, we make we make the ability to be able to resolve any conflict or controversy or problem that we're dealing with, because we now have a goal that both parties or everybody is trying to identify or trying to resolve together. And that's a very important part in what we're trying to do, is if we can do it together collectively. But it takes the right attitude to be able to do that, though. And
Yep.
that's the thing that we're going to talk about as it relates to how we get that type of an attitude that's a win-win basically for everybody concerned. Now, the easiest thing for me to start with as it relates to um, trying to find that thing that's in common, and this is something that goes back to my book that I wrote called Love Made Simple: The Guide to Inner Peace, Contentment, and Success. It's about the ability to find that thing that we all have in common. And that thing that we all have in common is humanity. All of us, we are in this thing together. And if we could start there and then start to back out to find out, based on the situation, what is it that we have in common? Because you're amazing. If we start with something that we can have in common, it allows us to build on, as we try to resolve the issue, if that being the core thing that we're trying to get. Now, I'm going to give you an example of what I mean by this. I've been married for 26 years, and to be able to have something in common, especially when it comes to any type of challenge. If you got a differences of opinion or something, but when we really go back and we go to try to resolve it, we have to refer back to our original goal or our purpose for our union. And that purpose or that union, that thing that we have in common, is that we wanted to make a difference. You know, how did what we're getting into or what we're doing is making a difference in not only our lives, but other people's lives. And so when we run into issues where we see certain things differently, we go back, okay, how does this relate? How does this begin to refer to what our initial goal was? What our initial goal was. And so we didn't solve that problem. So, okay, if this is your solution, this is my solution. How does that help what our ultimate goal was? So it's the ability to be able to shift whatever the situation is and begin to change our attitude towards it. Is that attitude selfish, or is it agreeing with what we initially said that we agreed on?
Mhm.
Okay. And so that's the ability to be able to understand how we use an attitude. Um, so with that, then we took it to how do we the decision making process, setting goals, um, is what we use to align our attitude with the goals that we have. If we can set that attitude in line with the goals that we have, then we can meet that goal. That's where we want to go. We want to make sure that that attitude is there. And then we identify a winning attitude um, it has to do with our motivation, and this is another thing that a lot of us have to understand. When we our motivation and our attitude, they demonstrate one another. You
Hmm,
know,
okay.
you will tell on us.
Let me go back a little bit
Mm,
because and I like what you're doing in terms of walking us through the trajectory of what that looks like. The often I think many of us look at our attitude as being the starting point for everything that is taking place in our lives. And while everything is affected by that, the trajectory of where we go as it relates to this thing called life is definitely a byproduct of our attitude.
mm-hmm,
The thing, however, that feeds into our attitude is actually our perspective. So if you look at the definition of attitude, right, um, it's basically a settled way of thinking.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Whether it's about a person, whether it's about a thing, whether it's about a situation, a scenario, whatever, right? And that is typically often reflected in our behavior.
It's the
Right.
influence.
Right. So so if our behavior is exhibited a certain way, that behavior is tied to an attitude. The behavior is a reflection of that attitude.
Absolutely.
The attitude is a byproduct of that perspective.
It's the opinion, behavior, and action.
Right. So when we're
Mm-hmm,
talking about now having a winning attitude, in order to in if you have a winning attitude, there are going to be some behaviors that are a reflection of that attitude. But in
mm-hmm,
order to have a winning attitude, you have to have the perspective that you deserve to win, or that you want to win, or that you need to win,
mm-hmm.
or that you have a desire to win. Because if that's not your perspective, and we talk about life, and I love the title of this is, we talk about this all the time, is a play on words, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's life. We're talking about it's life, the holistic thing that we are participating in. And then the play on words is it's life, like it is what it is.
Yeah.
Now, if that's your perspective, it is what it is. Your attitude can't be a winning attitude, because a winning attitude is not a byproduct of it is what it is.
Yeah.
Right. So I just wanted to say that, just for those who are listening, just to kind of pull all of that together, because
Yeah.
the trajectory that you're laying out right now is only possible if at the onset you have a desire to win and you believe you can.
And that's critical in the attitude of understanding what it means to have a winning attitude. You've got to want to have a winning attitude.
Right.
And that's intentional, and that's something that we've talked about before. And what I'm suggesting here tonight is that if you can desire it, you can control it. If you can desire it, you can control it, because these attitudes that we talk about, they are learned.
Hmm. Okay.
They're learned, and you can and they're you've been influenced into repeating them over and over, and it allows you to position yourself as you walk through this thing called life. As we navigate this thing called life, we then find ourselves repeating these same attitudes over and over again, not really understanding that they are the trajectory to getting us to the outcome. They're leading us somewhere
Hmm.
every time, over and over again. And then it's not until we're able to adjust, learn something different, that that thing will begin to change the outcome, because that's ultimately what we're looking for, is an outcome that adds to our life and makes it more productive and makes us successful in this experience.
Let me ask you something, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm not attempting to derail this, for those.
No, You know how we do it. Go
Yeah,
for it.
so for those who might be just joining, we're talking about winning attitudes and understanding the power of our attitude and really walking through the trajectory of attitude and its effect and how behaviors are reflected in that, how that is a byproduct of the perspective, and then what it looks like, right, to have that kind of winning attitude. What define winning?
That's interesting because that's exactly what one of the things that I was talking about is what winning looks like
Hmm.
is it's when everybody can win. Everybody gets what they need out of the event, out of the circumstances, out of the situation. That's what winning looks like. It's but you have to have something in common to be able to have that kind of win.
Okay.
It's that ability, because again, that goes back to your motivation. What's your motivation? And that really begins to establish, if you have a selfish motivation, it's going to be impossible for you to get this winning attitude,
I agree with
because
that.
a winning attitude has to be selfless. Because and I'm gonna and here's the interesting part about it. A self What's the difference between a selfish attitude and a selfless attitude? It really indicates the ability to be able to connect to one another.
Hmm.
And it's in that connection that opportunities come your way.
Yeah, and one quite honestly is one is internally motivated, if you will.
Hmm.
One is externally motivated. Uh,
Go ahead.
no, I was just gonna say that, one and essentially, not to overcomplicate it. Like if I'm selfish, the focus is on me. Now, are
Hmm.
there times where that is necessary? Absolutely.
Hmm.
But if it comes at the expense of my contribution to humanity, then I'm probably going down a path that's not conducive to my success.
Well, and the thing about it is that to be able to recognize when it's necessary to be motivated to improve yourself for the purpose of being able to give yourself,
Hmm.
to be able to be a resource, or a resource to someone else. Every one of us has to develop, and we have to develop ourselves in our own way.
Hmm.
We've got to be, and that never stops. We've got to continue to develop ourselves so that we have more to offer every day in this journey. And so it's through that growth and development that we have something to offer. So, but the whole point is that as it relates to this attitude has a purpose for something bigger than ourselves. And
Hmm.
that is that we can begin to connect to one another through them. And it's that opportunity that then we begin to see things that we would have otherwise not been able to see because of the connection.
Okay.
And that's probably the biggest advantage that we can have in this experience called life, is because I don't know what I don't know, but if I connect to you and you have what I need, then that means that my attitude has not been about selfishness. It's about protecting me. It's about, what do I have that I can give you so that we can have a relationship and we can build together.
So would you say that a winning attitude is the uh, conglomerate, if you will, of several other positive attitudes?
Yes, I mean, because that's where you connect.
Okay.
If it's kind of difficult for you to connect to if you're a positive, let's use positive negative. If now that they're gonna resist one another.
Hmm.
And so that's not going to be something that's going to be conducive to your growth and development. um but at the same time, it fits. They fit somewhere else. That person fits somewhere else.
Right.
So it's not like it's they're a bad person or you're a bad person. It's just not for you.
Hmm.
But there are plenty of us out here that are we need connection. It's important. It's essential that we are connected. And so, go ahead.
I was going to say, well, just in listening to what you say, I dare say then if we're talking about understanding the power of our attitude and we're talking about having a winning attitude and we know that our behavior is a reflection of our attitude, in order to even get to the point where our attitude is a winning attitude, which is reflected in our behavior, there
Hmm.
are probably some other things that we need to really be intentional about in terms of just how we view humanity, how we view connection, how we view ourselves, how how we are able to make the alignment between who we are, what our purpose is, and how that purpose fits into the overall humanity in
Well,
order to be in a mind space that will allow us to have a winning attitude.
yeah, you're absolutely right. And that being the case, we look at the thing that we have in common with one another, and that's humanity, as we talked about. And then we talk about purpose.
Mhm.
And purpose for each and every one of us as it pertains to humanity, it's the same. We all have uniquenesses that we use in doing this or to facilitate that purpose, but that purpose is it's to preserve and protect humanity for the next generation. Because then you get into a previous conversation that you and I have had before, and it's just humanity is bigger than any one of us. And so to be a part of something bigger than us, then to know that we have the right attitude towards that, and knowing that it's about protecting and preserving it so that the next generation can continue to build on humanity.
Mhm.
What is our investment? And see, this is what selfishness is. Selfishness is temporary, but selflessness is an investment into the future. And that's what we need to be able to have the right winning attitude, because we want to have the attitude that brings life and brings growth and brings development to the point where it's going to be long after we're gone. It's going to be still working.
Mhm.
And that's what we have, but we've got to have the right attitude to do it.
So, so here's the $6 million question.
Mm-hmm.
S- Let's say we get to the point now we understand that, right? We understand that our attitude is important. We understand the power of our attitude. We understand that our perspective has to be in alignment on the onset and that everything kind of feeds through that all the way down to the behaviors that are reflected, right?
Mm-hmm.
How do we go about the business of changing that perspective, adjusting that perspective so that we then in turn begin to adopt the attitudes that will be conducive to our success? How do we do that?
Well, that's the thing. If you change, if you recognize, the first thing is that you do have, everybody has a perspective or that attitude
Mhm.
that you're going to be presented in any situation. Then we really have to be willing to go through the process and say, okay, I want to change this. I want to change this perspective so that I can get a a reward or a benefit it's bigger than myself. That's more than just for me.
Mhm.
That's what parents do with their children. We're basically saying, how can I advance their lives? How can I give them more than what I had? But if I don't have that attitude, I don't have that desire, I can't give it to them. And then we have to go through the process of doing the work on the inside to say, okay, what am I allowing to influence me? That's getting me to keep this perspective or this attitude towards these type of things. And it's very interesting. We are in a cycle in our experience in life, and we allow things like the media to dictate to us what our perspective is. And so with doing that, we end up following instead of identifying our uniqueness, our what's important to us. And so one of the things that I want to talk about, and one of the things that we want to do on this show, I think is like, what are some of the current events that are dictating those things to us? And some of those things like that are in the media today, what's in the news. What do you think? What's the first thing that comes to your mind, Oliver, that's in the news right now?
Man, a couple things come to mind. This this this
Go ahead,
this
say it.
this altercation that took place in the South. That's a real, that's been a big one. Um,
Okay.
and there's a few of them, but we can go with that one.
Here's the thing. How do you determine the perspective, the proper perspective, or the winning perspective on that experience? And let's be clear. We're talking about the Alabama brawl, right?
Right. Yeah,
I mean,
it may depend on what side you on.
but see, that's just it. That is just it. One of the things that I look at when I think of things like that, I got like, what makes this right or wrong? And see, we got so many issues in our country that if we were to take that situation and put it in a vacuum,
Mhm.
okay, what would be right about that event? If you put it in a vacuum, nothing else around it, nothing, there was nothing that you could think of that would have preceded it, that would have caused that type of event. What would have made that right?
Hmm. Again, that's relative, but I'll speak for myself. I think the thing that if there's nothing, if I'm not making more out of this, so to speak, than what it is, um, the idea around having somebody else's back that you don't know and coming to the aid of someone that in a way that may not benefit you actually may cause detriment in some cases, depending on what happens, is you could say is admirable in the way of attitude, right? So if my attitude is I am my brother's keeper, and I see my brother in some kind of scenario that's probably going may not end up well, that I'm my duty is to swim across the channel
Wow.
and pick up a folding chair.
This is,
So that, I mean, that's you could look at it from that perspective.
yeah, but here's the thing. What that's interesting that you pick it up at that point. That's the point where you pick it up. What is the event that caused him to take the swim?
So, um, and I don't know what you're alluding to, but
No, no,
that
I'm
the way I
backing us
understand,
out. I'm
yeah.
I'm backing us out.
So the way I understand it is that there's this ferry or boat thing that's trying to
Hmm.
dock.
Hmm.
There's another boat in the way that's not supposed to be there,
Hmm.
and the security personnel is trying to get the owners of this boat to move, and they don't want to move.
Hmm.
Now, a piece of the clip I saw is that the folk that are on the boat that's waiting to dock are kind of egging this thing on, if you really want to call it that, right? They're getting it's a little rowdy. They're engaging with the boat owners as well while the security personnel is doing that. So there's there's a scenario that causes this engagement.
Yes, yeah. It's an altercation,
Mm-hmm.
and the altercation there was the altercation there was a right and a wrong for the need or the reason of that altercation.
Mm-hmm.
Would you agree with that?
I would agree with that.
Okay. So if we take that out, if we take everything else out to play, where's the altercation? Okay, so the altercation was there was an official that confronted a violator of the area there, and the person was not receptive to them being addressed.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so there's this altercation that's being presented,
Mm-hmm.
where there is a person that's out of order
Right.
and someone who's trying to maintain order. So the altercation occurs because of that.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I'm referring to, where's the right or the wrong? That everything that follows that, where's the right in everything that follows that?
Mm. That would depend on who you talk to, because there may be a group of people who say everything that follows that was wrong.
Well,
And there are a group of people, obviously, based on what has happened in social media, that definitely think it was right.
but here's the point. On both sides, I can basically say, you know, both of them would say that it was right. Can you see that both said that it was right? Because from one perspective, they were right for saying, now I'm not saying that they were right in having that opinion,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm saying the reason why they did it is that they thought they were right in being able to do what they did.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, that perspective caused the conflict, because there was a misunderstanding there as it relates to what was deemed as right. See, you see, we digging deep, and we're gonna get to a place that is really the culprit here.
Mm-hmm.
And as a result, you have to make a decision and have an attitude towards this event, this situation, because it just depends on where your perspective is on this thing.
I would agree with that.
And that's why I was saying, if you could put it in a vacuum, if you could put it in a vacuum, what was right about it? What was right about what happened? There was all wrong. Everything was wrong. Everything was wrong about it if you take it out, if you put it in a vacuum.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, we couldn't do that. We can't put it in a vacuum.
Right.
And that's where everything begins to get really blurry as relates to now. What was it really about? What was it really about?
And I think if you really want to go back, right? If you really want to go back even before we this incident even took place, right? Much of that behavior, if we're gonna keep it a buck,
Mm-hmm.
much of that behavior, if because let's keep it in context of what we're talking about. We're talking about attitudes.
Right.
Attitudes are are reflected in our behavior.
Mm-hmm.
So much of that behavior is based on an attitude that's shaped by a perspective that has been created because there are so many events like that.
Learned.
Right. There are so many instances where individuals feel more privileged
There your
or
word.
feel privileged in a way that allows them to be above whatever regulate the regulations are, or privileged in a way that causes them to treat another person with disrespect. So we already have that perspective. So as soon as we see any level of behavior or thought or an inkling that it may go in the direction of what we already have a perspective about,
Mm-hmm.
our attitude is that, hey, here we go again. And that attitude now is reflected in our behavior.
Absolutely.
So so now you see a group of individuals, our light skinned family, that lighter skinned family, kind of asserting themselves, feeling like they don't need to be respectful of this guy, African American man. They don't need to be respectful of him. They don't need to listen to what he's saying. They don't need to abide by whatever the situation is. We're like, all right, here we go. We've seen this before.
Mm-hmm.
We already have a perspective about this because we've seen it before. We've seen it 100 times before.
Yep.
So we already have an attitude towards how this to these kinds of scenarios.
Right.
And then the moment that now the door is open for some opportunity to be on the defense in terms of protecting this thing based on our attitude, now that's reflected in our behavior.
Yeah. I mean, here's the thing. It's inevitable that we're going to respond according to our attitude.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it is. It's our perspective, and that's just something that we've got to be able to look at it. But for it to be resolved, because like right now, there's no resolution. As a matter of fact, what would you say? Would you say that the event was over at the
Uh,
time that it appears to be over? Do you think it's over?
no, I don't think. I think there's always going to be in situations like this. There's always going to be some level of residual. Um, and that's the unfortunate nature of these kinds of scenarios is that there's always some level of residual. Um, whether the people in the incident that are involved in the incident are the ones who are causing that residual, or it's all of us who react to it and herald it in one way or another, or create extra sidebar conflict around it. There's always some kind of residual, always.
And that's the part that now we have to navigate,
Hmm.
because now no one knows when or where it's going to occur.
Yeah.
It's like when you're threatened and made to look like um, you've lost, um, the opportunity that you're going to be seeking to get back. You know that that event. If you look at social media, it took on a life of its own.
It did. It did. And this is another conversation altogether, but it's related because we're talking about attitudes.
Mm-hmm.
So the attitude that I need to stand up for my brother is actually it is a great attitude if we're taking it outside of the context of the event. The attitude that causes me to feel like I need to stand up for someone else is a great attitude. The issue, and this is where it goes into a different conversation, the issue is that that attitude is generally that attitude is generally it only pops up generally in those kinds of scenarios. Now, those who are watching, they can throw stones if you want, but let's keep it a buck. If we're gonna keep it real, if I see you about to fight a white dude, I'm gonna be more apt to jump in than if I see you about to fight a black dude.
And that was very interesting, because I heard that was one of the things that I saw on social media, and it was the fact that this thing galvanized the Black community.
But unfortunately, and I'm not saying there's a right or wrong here, but
Mm.
unfortunately, it's always these kinds of scenarios that galvanize the Black community.
But see, but this is why I'm presenting it the way that I did. Is that where's the right? Where's the right? See, this is the point that we're getting at. We can throw stones, and we
Hmm.
can get, but the fact of the matter is, the stones have never won any wars.
Yeah.
Stones ain't never won no wars.
I'll say this though, from an attitude perspective, the right for me is that you saw someone in need and you felt like you needed to do something. That's a great attitude. Now, here's the thing. Your that the attitude probably should be tweaked in one way or another, because if our behavior is a reflection of our attitude, there's something within that attitude that is like, hey, I'm a step in when I feel like this is going to be beneficial in one way.
Here's the challenge there. When we just look at, we just visualize things,
Hmm.
and we look at things just from face value.
Hmm.
Is it worth jumping into if the person was wrong? Because guess what? On the other side, there were plenty of people jumping in on the other side, and it was dead wrong. But they were jumping in just because. They were jumping in because they had that identity just as the others had on the other side.
Yeah.
And
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 yeah.
so nobody wants to stop and go, okay, what was right about this thing? Just because. Now, granted, we're not talking about the legalities of it, in the sense that, yeah, the dude was wrong. He shouldn't have done it. But there's always this thing is, we don't look for the resolution. We look for face value. We look at face value. And that's what I'm saying. It's what's in the best interest of the situation, of the bigger whole, the whole good. And this is true to the thing that when I refer to, and I can't help but bring up my book, because Love Made Simple is about collective. How do we navigate this thing called life when we cannot understand that it's going to take sacrifice?
Hmm.
It's going to take sacrifice. And an attitude, sacrifice is an attitude. Sacrifice is something that you have to intentionally want to do. And in a situation like that, did that situation have to get to that point?
The quick answer to that is no, it probably didn't have to get to that point.
Well, when I say that point where it
Mhm.
would be perceived as a brawl.
So this may be contrary to popular opinion, right? So the real answer to that question, the real answer, and often the real answer to many questions, is not reflected in how we live our lives, because we don't feel like life, the
Is
way it
fair.
is right now, is conducive to the real answer playing out.
Okay.
The
Okay.
real answer is no, it probably didn't have to get to that. But I feel like the way life is now, everyone is on edge. So if you see anything that looks like it might lead to an altercation, you're automatically on the defense. Being on the defense opens the door for these kinds of scenarios to bubble.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so now for those who might say, okay, yeah, this could be handled another way, there's just as many individuals, if not more, that are like, no, this can never be handled another way, because the way that the scenario presents itself is not going to change. So until the way the scenario presents itself changes, the attitude towards that cannot change. And hence, if the attitude does not change, the behaviors that are reflected are always going to be the same.
Exactly. And this is what I'm saying, though. But the way in which we determine and I use the word sacrifice. Here's the point.
Hmm.
Sacrifice has to be the cause. The biggest thing that we're going to have to use is to be willing to understand the greater good. And if we continue to focus on the past, then we're never going to be able to get to the greater good, because there is no justification for the past. There's no justification for it. There's no rationalizing it. There's no way that we can make it okay. Okay. We've got to be able to get the attitude of saying what's in the best interest of the future.
So let me play devil's advocate for a second.
Go ahead.
Based on what you just said, right? The question
Hmm.
I have for you now is, how do you sell that to the general public? Because you're going to have a group of people who are like, "Hey, yeah, I can do that, but I can turn let's liken that to turning the other cheek. I can
Hmm.
turn the other cheek and have that
Hmm.
kind of attitude, but what happens when I turn the other cheek and the other person is still in boxing mode?
No,
Now I'm
no,
just playing myself because I'm gonna get hit on the other side of my face."
no, no. See, this is the whole point. I'm saying it, there was a point that could have been well restrained
Okay.
without it getting to the point of being a brawl.
Okay.
Okay, I'm not. I mean, you had a lot of you had a lot of animosity built up. There was a lot of animosity built up.
Now, when they were speculating now, of course, but do you feel like that's based on? Could that be based on maybe his previous experience with individuals at that location?
Oh, I'm not. Again, I can't. How he got that animosity, or how the collective got that animosity.
Hmm.
That's those learned things and experiences and things and
Hmm.
influences. That's the challenge that we're up against. And when I talk about moving forward and going forward, is because we have to deal with the fact that this is how I was treated. This is the way I understand. And we're asking ourselves internally, and this is what change is all about, is saying, I'm going to do something willingly, making the choice. I'm
Hmm.
choosing to do something different than what has been done in the past.
So let me ask you this, and again, this is all speculation, right?
Mhm.
Based on your comment that this could have gone differently, what could what could have caused it to go differently? What would have had to happen in order for it not to end up being what it was?
There's a lot that collectively had to happen
Hmm.
for it not to get to the way it got to. Now here's the thing about it is, there's been said that there's a lot of people that if the shoe had been on the other foot, um, the person who there would have been some death. People would have died. Okay, if it had been differently, people would have died.
Hmm.
And here's the thing about it. That's the point that you've got to be able to rationalize the fact that you're not going to correct. You're not going to fix this by trying to beat someone at their own game. We've got to find a way to rise above the circumstances, and that's
Hmm.
that's that's just the way it's got to be.
So
And I
here's the thing: I don't disagree with you. Let's be clear about that.
Mhm.
My question is, how is that conveyed in a way that allows people to feel safe enough to make that adjustment?
S- s-
So,
here's here,
or let
that
me rephrase that. How do you convey that allows people to make the adjustment without fear that the adjustment will be one sided?
you can't. There's absolutely no way that you can do it, and that's the element that we're talking about as it relates to being able to overcome that fear of it not being reciprocated.
Hmm.
Because the fact is that um, what you want to do is you want to prevent those things from happening. You're not going to be able to control them once they're in existence. Once they occur, it's too hostile, it's too volatile. So what we've got to do is we've got to work to prevent them. And there's a lot in this country that we've got to do to change the appearance and the perception as relates to what's real and I mean what's legal and what's illegal.
Hmm.
Because to be honest with you, we're a nation confused. We're a confused nation. And we say we want one thing, but we don't legislate what we want. We legislate, people legislate what they're comfortable with.
Hmm.
And so as these types of attitudes, they've got to be built up to the point where people don't want to do the things. Because here's the point. I'm of the mindset that it didn't necessarily have to start off as a racial issue,
Okay.
but that just made it that much more volatile. It made it that much more volatile because if it had not been, you want to know the example that comes to mind was when those police officers killed that guy. And I don't know where he was, but they were all black police officers that killed a black guy.
Hmm.
And the first thing that you wanted to do to say was it was racial, but it wasn't. That was the first inkling that people was like, but then soon as they found out that the officers were black and the person that they would kill was black, that was almost like it made it okay in certain in a way. You know, it
Hmm.
just took some of the visceral out of it because now it's like we can't use that card, can't go there. We can't say it was racially motivated. Now it's the police thing.
Hmm.
And so we've got to be able to somehow or another change our attitudes towards one another. And we've got to change our attitudes. Now, and here's the point. Collectively, I think it has to be done. One person at a time is the only way that we're going to be able to do it. But we've got to be able to influence our brothers. We've got to be able to influence and not be afraid to take an approach that is contrary or different than it has been in the past.
Yeah. That's an
It,
uphill. That's an uphill battle in this current climate. I'm not saying it's impossible, but that is an uphill battle because now what you got to find folks who are willing to frontline this, meaning that they're going to adopt this attitude and it will be reflected in their behaviors and they will be taking a chance on it being heavily one-sided, which will
well,
put them at a disadvantage.
don't get me wrong. I'm not saying being fool. Don't be no fool.
Yeah, I get you. I
I'm
get you.
not.
I know
I'm
what you're
not saying
saying.
being no fool.
Yeah,
I'm.
I know
I'm.
what you're saying.
I'm saying that if I have a chance to knock you out versus control you, I'm gonna control you versus knock you out. You know, I'm gonna take an approach that's gonna be benefit to not only myself but to you too. You know, that's the part, that's the attitude adjustment that I'm saying. And now if they get the opportunity, would they do the same? No, probably I don't know.
And that's where the apprehension is because that right there, what you just described, you are in a minority right now.
Oh, I don't
And
I don't doubt
even
that.
if there are people who think that, even if there are people who think that way, because I'm not going to say there's not a bunch of people who think that way. There are probably a bunch of people who think that way, but the behavior that's displayed may not reflect that because of fear that the other person ain't thinking that way.
Oh, and that's the whole point. And that's where fear has to be overcome. And I know that's a difficult thing to deal with, is to say fear of that situation is you got to overcome it. But that's the practicality of it, is that, you know, what we're talking about is changing that attitude that says that you're valuable to me, even if you don't know it.
Hmm.
And I'm saying that even in our community,
Mm-hmm.
even in our community, we got to, because see, we're struggling in our community with that.
Mm-hmm. We are.
And so we've got to understand that this is not necessarily a racial issue. An attitude starts to talking about a human issue. It's a human issue that we're dealing with.
So essentially, Clear Journey has its work cut out for
Ah, that's okay. That's
it.
okay. But it's an attitude that we can see as we begin to walk this walk. We'll begin to see the beginnings of it in our own lives.
Mm-hmm.
Because ideally, what we're talking about is that this is not supposed to be a confrontational type of thing. This journey is supposed to be a collective thing. That we're looking to walk this thing, or to do this thing collectively together. Yeah, we've got some uphill battles, but it's the journey that's rewarding. It's the journey.
Let me ask you this: do we need? And I'm being controversial now. I'm
Go
just
for
for
it.
the sake of it. Do we need people that don't look like us to also herald that same?
we
Uh,
need we need everybody. It's not an exclusive group here. We need everybody to understand that just because we don't look alike don't mean that we're not alike. We all are human beings. We all are a part of this species, and together is what we're going to be able to move it on to the next generation. Not exclusivity. It's just not, in spite of, you go back to World War II and you're talking about trying to annihilate a certain group of people. That's as far as, I mean, you got something going on like that right now in Europe. Literally, they're trying to annihilate a group of people because they don't think that they should be. It's utterly ridiculous. But when are we going to stand up and say, okay, now that's an assault. That's an assault on humanity. That's what that is, an assault on humanity for no apparent reason, not provoked at all. And for the last 18 months, they've been shooting at them, blowing up, killing people just for the sake of, because they can. That's the world
yeah,
we live in.
that's the world we live in, and I think that I agree that we have to, you know, individually make this adjustment to how we approach life, um, what our perspective is, what our attitudes are around that, and it's tough. It's tough because at the same time as you begin to develop and stand up those principles, at the same time, for many of us, especially in the Black community,
Mm-hmm.
as we stand up those principles, at the very same time we also have to stand up principles, guidelines, ideologies that also protect us.
And that's why collectively we've got to understand the system in which we live in and begin to legislate. This is not going to be something that is not going to be done apart from the legislative thing. We've got to do a lot of work in a lot of different areas, but it starts initially with people wanting to make a change. You've got pockets, but it starts with an attitude. It starts with then having the attitude that our behavior demonstrates.
That's a good way to bring it back. I think that's a good place to land the plane, so to speak. That's a good place
Yeah,
to bring it back. I mean, there's a lot of work to do. We know that.
but
There's a
but
lot of apprehension around the work that needs to be done. Um,
and don't and here's the thing. It's about preventing those type of things, but having the attitude to want to prevent them instead of wanting to confront them. Because you're not gonna run from no fight.
Hmm.
That's just it. We've got to prevent the fight because we ain't nobody running from none.
Right.
As a matter of fact, we swim to
Indeed.
them. Yeah. So look, hey, this was the inauguration. Um, and I'm talking, you really jumped in on a biggie there, because we're talking about attitudes, and attitudes are in every area of our lives, though, because
Hmm.
we demonstrate them, and how we demonstrate them. Um, is it, is it beneficial? It tells us where we are. If it's selfish or selfless, it tells on us.
Hmm.
But we've got to understand that if we got a bigger picture, we've got to be able to stay committed to the bigger picture
Yeah.
when we are confronted with these obstacles in the middle.
I like
So, so we're going to call it a day. It's been a wonderful beginning. Hopefully, we can pick it up on next Wednesday.
Yep, that'll work. We'll be back next Wednesday. And for those of you who are podcast listeners, go check out the It's Life podcast, where we have great conversations just like this one,
Yeah.
on a number of topics, and you can catch us
Tell,
there as well.
tell them where they can reach you at, Oliver, how they can catch up with you.
Listen, you can email me, Oliver at Denali.org. Denali.org is the hub for everything. You can check out that website. If you're a social media person, Denali LLC everywhere on social media. Would love to connect with you. As I said in the beginning, very passionate about seeing relationships thrive, both personally and professionally. So if that is something that you desire, I would love to have a conversation with you.
Cool. Hey, and by the way, people, we really would like for you to go over to clearjourney.org, see what we have over there. We're talking about the 8 areas of life that if we can master those 8 areas of life with the right attitudes, we can live that successful life that we desire, no matter what areas that we are in. So go over, look at the website, see if there's something there that can help you in navigating your journey in life. And we look forward. If you want to support us, there's an opportunity there to support us. And we look forward to seeing you next time here on It's Life. It's live. It's Life Live.
All right, family. Take care.
All righty. Talk to you.
We see you next week.